Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to WNBA Trending. I'm your host, Ava, and tonight we're diving into one of the most talked about storylines in women's basketball, sports radio legend Dan Patrick's recent remarks about Paige Bueckers and Caitlin Clark, and how their careers were once expected to form the defining rivalry of women's basketball. The conversation has sparked a wave of discussion among fans, analysts, and former players alike, raising questions not just about rivalries in the WNBA, but also about how narratives in sports are shaped long before players even reach the professional level. Let's break it down. Dan Patrick, one of the most respected voices in sports broadcasting, recently claimed that the great rivalry the women's basketball world was supposed to witness wasn't Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese, or Caitlin Clark versus Cameron Brink, but instead Caitlin Clark versus Paige Bueckers. According to Patrick, this matchup had all the makings of an iconic sports rivalry. Two superstars, both highly skilled, both extremely popular, and both coming from powerhouse programs. To understand his point, we have to look back a few years. Paige Bueckers, the standout guard from UConn, burst onto the scene in 2020. In her freshman year, she became the first freshman ever to win the AP Player of the Year award. She was dazzling with her playmaking, silky jump shot, and leadership skills. Bueckers wasn't just good, she was box office. Every time she stepped onto the court, people tuned in, and the hype around her was massive. On the other side, Caitlin Clark was emerging at Iowa. Known for her deep three-point range, high-octane scoring, and competitive fire, Clark quickly became the face of women's college basketball. She led the Hawkeyes to unprecedented national attention, smashing records and electrifying fans with her Steph Curry-like shooting ability. By 2021, it looked like the sport had its two stars. Bueckers at UConn, a program with a legendary pedigree under Gino Auriemma, and Clark at Iowa, a Midwestern underdog program now elevated by her brilliance. The stage was set for an epic rivalry, East Coast dominance versus Midwest firepower. But then reality hit. Paige Bueckers suffered significant injuries, including a torn ACL, which sidelined her for the entire 2022 to 2023 season. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark kept ascending, building her legacy with record-breaking scoring performances, Final Four appearances, and eventually becoming the #1 overall pick in the 2024 WNBA draft. Clark's rise was meteoric, while Bueckers was forced to rehab and rebuild, delaying what could have been a head-to-head rivalry that Patrick argues was supposed to be. Now, let's pause here. Rivalries in sports are not just about talent, they're about timing. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird weren't just great players, they entered the NBA at the same time, played in opposite conferences, and faced each other in the finals multiple times. That's what makes a rivalry stick. For Clark and Bueckers, the timing hasn't lined up, at least not yet. Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA with the Indiana Fever and instantly became the face of the league, breaking attendance records, driving TV ratings, and selling out arenas wherever she played. Angel Reese, her college rival from LSU, joined her in the league and has been framed as Clark's primary counterpart because of their fiery battles in March Madness, most notably the 2023 National Championship game. Meanwhile, Paige Bueckers chose to stay another year at UConn, aiming to restore her dominance in the college game before heading to the professional stage. Her decision makes sense. After injuries, she needed more time to reestablish her rhythm and prove she can stay healthy for a full season. This brings us back to Dan Patrick's point. According to him, women's basketball fans were deprived, at least temporarily, of what could have been the league's biggest rivalry. Imagine if both Clark and Bueckers entered the 2024 WNBA draft together. Imagine them being drafted to opposing teams and carrying over their college rivalry into the professional ranks. That, Patrick argues, was the matchup everyone was waiting for. Of course, sports don't always follow the script, and rivalries often emerge in unexpected places. Right now, Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese is the headline rivalry in the WNBA. It's flashy, it's competitive, and it has a real backstory that fans can latch onto. Their games against each other draw huge ratings and spark endless debate on social media. But does that mean Bueckers versus Clark won't happen? Not necessarily. If Bueckers enters the WNBA draft in 2025, and if she lands with a franchise that squares off frequently against Clark's Indiana Fever, that long-anticipated rivalry could still become a reality. Let's also consider this. Rivalries evolve. At one point, many believed Diana Taurasi versus Sue Bird would define an era. Later, it was Taurasi versus Maya Moore. And more recently, it's been Breanna Stewart against Aya Wilson. Rivalries shift as new stars rise, as teams contend, and as personalities clash. So maybe the real story here isn't about what was lost, but about what's still possible. Patrick's comments remind us of how much the women's game has grown. A few years ago, it would have been rare to hear mainstream sports voices talk about women's basketball rivalries in the same way they do men's. Now, conversations about Clark, Reese, Bueckers, and others dominate headlines, sports radio, and social media. That's a win for the game as a whole. Let's also acknowledge the players themselves. Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers have expressed nothing but respect for each other. They may not see themselves as rivals in the traditional sense, but rather as competitors pushing each other to raise the bar. That's another key element of rivalries, mutual respect mixed with competition. Fans, on the other hand, often fuel these rivalries with their passion. Just look at how debates rage online. Clark fans tout her scoring records, while Bueckers supporters point to her all-around skill set and her leadership at UConn. Social media magnifies everything, and sometimes that's enough to keep a rivalry alive, even if the head-to-head matchups haven't fully materialized yet. So where does this leave us? Dan Patrick's statement has added fuel to the fire of a conversation that isn't going away anytime soon. Will Clark versus Bueckers eventually take center stage in the WNBA? Or will Clark's rivalry with Reese, or even a future rivalry with someone like Paige Bueckers, take precedence? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, women's basketball is thriving. The fact that we're even having debates about which rivalry will define the future of the WNBA shows just how far the sport has come. Fans care. Media cares. And most importantly, the players are delivering must-watch performances every single night. To wrap this up, Dan Patrick may be right. Paige Bueckers versus Caitlin Clark was supposed to be the rivalry. Injuries, timing, and fate may have delayed it, but the door isn't closed. If Bueckers enters the league healthy and strong, and if she and Clark meet on the WNBA's biggest stages, fans could still get the showdown they've been dreaming of. Until then, rivalries will continue to shift, evolve, and surprise us. And that's the beauty of sports. Nothing is ever certain, and sometimes the stories we least expect become the ones we'll never forget.